What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. Now in this video I'm going to be starting off my very first ever custom water cooling loop and I'm going to be taking you all along for the journey. So what I'm going to be doing here is splitting this into smaller parts. This video will be about how I picked all of the parts in hopes to help some of you understand what is actually needed when starting a custom water cooling loop. Part 2 will be about cleaning and preparing all the parts as well as testing the loop for leaks. And part 3, the final part, where I'll be reviewing the custom water cooling loop with the noise and temperature testing along with all the other CPU cooler review stuff that I typically do. And as always, if you do have any questions, please just leave them in the comments. I do try my best to answer all the questions. Okay, about the parts. As far as I can tell, any reasonably priced water cooling kit is completely sold out, at least here in Canada. Now, before anyone asks, $400 to $500 Canadian dollars is not a reasonable price to me because you can actually pretty much build an APU system for that price. So buying something to just cool the CPU for that price sounds crazy. At least it does to me. Now, when starting this process, it was my plan after sorting everything out and I was satisfied with how everything worked, was to upgrade the cooling in my editing rig. Now, if I do end up upgrading my editing rig, I'll be also switching out the case to something white. Now, I'm thinking the 4000D airflow, but I haven't really decided yet. So the idea was to try and get a white pump, radiator, or CPU block, or at least something that would go with a white case. Now, when looking through all the options with the premise that I wanted to try to keep costs down as much as possible, but I also didn't want to go like dirt cheap, the only option I really left myself with was to pick all the parts myself. Now, I was able to get everything I needed off of Amazon, although it wasn't off of Amazon.ca, more on that in a bit. And as I said in the intro, this is my first time doing a custom loop, so I wanted to try to keep things as simple and or as easy as possible. So with that in mind, I decided to go with a soft tubing. Once I decided on soft tubing, I started looking at soft tube fittings. I found a reasonably priced brass compression fitting that was sold in a 2-pack for just under 16 Canadian dollars. I ended up buying 4 packs, so 8 fittings in total. Now that I had picked out the fittings, I knew exactly what size tubing I needed, that being 9.5mm interior diameter. So I just went with the cheapest 9.5mm interior diameter tubing that had prime delivery. Since the tubing is pretty cheap, I do recommend you getting 2 sets, just to make sure that you do have enough tubing, because it would really suck that you start building whatever and you find out that you're like 2 or 3 inches short. Then I looked for a CPU block and I found a really nicely priced Freeze Mod brass-based AM4 block, which would go well enough with a white case. I also found a really good price on a white Freeze Mod pump and res combo, so I picked that up as well. Now, because the CPU block I picked was copper and the fittings were brass, I really wanted to go with a copper radiator, because like galvanic corrosion is a thing even when you use coolant. But the issue was, when I was ordering everything, Amazon.ca didn't have any white copper radiators that were in my budget. They do now, but that doesn't really help me when I was ordering everything, so yeah. What I ended up doing was ordering a white Freeze Mod copper radiator off of Amazon.com and just paid for the shipping. Now, when starting this whole process, it wasn't my intention to go with all Freeze Mod components. That's kind of just the way that all ended up working out. Now, I ended up buying some extra ease of use things as well, like a drainage valve, a threaded 3-way T, and a power supply jumper, just to make filling and draining the loop a little bit easier. I also picked up some adapters to get all that stuff to work together. So I picked up a set of male-to-male adapters, as well as some stop plugs, because having some stop plugs is always a good idea. So adding everything up, I ended up spending just over 275 Canadian dollars. So that's around 220 USD, plus fans, plus coolant, which in comparison to some of the named brand kits that run upwards of 500 Canadian, I'm pretty okay with what I ended up paying. Speaking of money, I did pay for all these parts myself, so if you like what I'm doing here, can you please like and share this video, as well as click on that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. Now, speaking of helping out the channel, I also have an Amazon Associates link, so if you click on one of the links in the description and then add items to your cart and order them, the channel does get a small kickback. Well, that's all I got for this part. I will be putting out part 2 very soon, where I'll be showing you how I cleaned all the parts and tested the loop for leaks. But until then, maybe check out some of these videos. Also, please follow me on Twitter at HFG_YT. Maybe think about joining the Discord server. It is completely free. The link is in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching and see you next time.